Okay, so yeah, my name is Olivia, and I am an author and a therapist. And credentials, I said them earlier, but I'm a fully licensed as a clinical mental health counselor, and I'm also a substance use disorder counselor and certified in domestic violence. So my passion is pretty much relational trauma, has probably been my whole life before I really knew what that was. But a few years ago, in working with clients, it became really clear that the majority of people, whether they were court ordered or just individuals looking for help, right, coming through the door, the majority of their issues were relational. Even if it was like meth or alcohol or something else, like marijuana, it really was relational. And if you kind of boiled that down, it was a boundary issue, right? Because who could do boundaries, right? So what I realized is I was working with individuals who had very specific questions, but I was trying to teach them ideas. So I was trying to teach them ideas on what boundaries were for their very specific issues, like how do I co-parent with the narcissist, right? Or my sister betrayed me and now I gotta go sit next to her at Thanksgiving, right? And I don't want to go, but if I don't go, my mom's gonna hate me, and I can't afford for my mom to hate me, so I'm like trapped. What do I do, right? So it seemed like there were different situations, different relationship types, and different circumstances, and we kind of had to recreate the will every single time we had a new boundary. And it was, again, an idea with a specific incident. There's lots of chairs too if you want to sneak in. You're fine. You make your noise, you just give yourself a seat. So from there, I developed a model. It's called the Relationship Trust Boundary Model. I wrote a book, designed a presentation, and that leads us here, right? So it's really cool because you will have to know what is within your scope of practice, which will determine how you use the model, to what extent you're going to use it. But for sure, you can teach it in a group. You can teach it to an individual, and it's really going to help you when you're working with the people that you get to serve and be a part of their lives. It's going to help you when you hear the problems they're having. It's going to be a lot easier to kind of get straight to the point and then give them a tool that can actually help them. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. This is the most important part. This is Kuma. Okay, you guys are my people, right? So Kuma, this is super important. He's a Great Pyrenees German Shepherd. And the year this was taken, he was the sheriff. So we say, don't mess around, you're going to find out, right? But really, isn't it interesting? Because those of you in here, which I heard my swooning over Kuma, those of you who are dog people, you immediately, you're like, okay, Libby's not that bad. I could probably listen to her talk for like an hour. Look at her pants, kind of cool. But those of you who are not dog people, you're like, wow, any nut job can stand up here in the microphone. They just really bring anybody, look at her pants, so stupid, right? So it's interesting because as I raise up on your list of, a person who has a dog, if you're a dog person, you probably gave me a bit more of your trust. You're a bit more willing to get close to me. You're a bit more willing to listen what I have to say, right? For those of you who are not dog people, which it doesn't sound like a lot of people in here are not dog people, thank goodness. You probably gave me a bit less of your trust. Maybe you backed away from me a bit, right? So the whole point is to pay attention. How do you determine who gets your trust? What do you use to decide who you get closer to as opposed to who you move further away from? Because we're going to circle back to that idea in just a second. So what do we want our clients to understand? What do we want the people we serve to understand? And maybe what's most beneficial for us to understand? We don't need someone to give us our rights. You already possess all the rights that you need to have, right? But if you notice from working with people with trauma, or if you come from trauma, sometimes anytime we have a need or we're trying to exercise a right, we just come in hot, right? We're coming in hard, swinging for the fences, right? Or we can beg and plead for our rights, demand that someone give us our rights, or just sort of try to be like totally compliant and invisible and hope someone's going to take pity on us and give us our rights, right? That's very common in trauma, any of those types of ways. But the reality is, you don't need someone to give you your rights. What we want to learn how to do is how to exercise the rights we already possess. And that's exactly what the model is going to teach you how to do. And it's going to do that by helping you to understand super simple, super clear what privacy is, what your right to privacy is, and then you're going to learn how to use boundaries to protect your right to privacy. So that's the whole point of having boundaries. You're using boundaries to protect your right to privacy, and the model is going to define all of that, break it down, make it super simple. Okay, so the purpose of the model, it is trauma informed. So as you're using it, you will be able to use all of SAMHSA's 6 key principles of providing good trauma informed care. And also, I don't know about you guys, but when I hear a tool is trauma informed, I want to know that it's developed and designed to help individuals in mind that have been through trauma. Because when we have trauma, it's such a pain in the butt, right? We have a lot of behaviors from our trauma that get us relational problems. Anybody ever ruin a whole relationship, right? Because of your trauma, and you're like, oh, I'm me. Sorry. But by then it's too late and you just lost everything, right? It's so horrible and painful. So the model is definitely designed to help those who have trauma, and you can practice Sam's 6 key principles as well. It's also going to help us to reconnect to our gut. It's going to teach us how to set boundaries and hold them in a safe way, because sometimes we're unsafe in how we try to hold and set our boundaries, right? Also, it's going to empower those who use the model to take their rights back in an effective way. Less time, less noise, less behavior. Just straight down the middle, super sweet and simple. It's going to teach you how to use trust, the relationship type, what your role in the relationship is, and also that's how you're going to determine where the boundary lies. So if you're like, that was a lot of words, it was, don't worry, we're going to break down, make it super simple. Okay, so this is a wonderful person and a wonderful dog, right? I don't know them, but who could resist them? So there's a few things that we want to understand to be able to use the model. And again, we're going to make it easy. So the first one is trust. Again, what role does trust play in your relationships? Does it play a role? Can we look at your relationships and see a difference based off trust earned and trust broken? Or do you treat everybody the same regardless how many times they kind of like, screwed you over, right? Does it look different? When trust is broken, does the relationship look different? And when trust is broken, does it look different? Or is there no relational change regardless of the amount of trust that's present or not, right? Relationships. We have many types of relationships. And we know with domestic violence, the best way for someone to get out and also stay out of domestic violence is to have a great support system. When we come from trauma, the trauma model with boundaries is usually all in or all out, right? And when you're all in, you get full access to self. And then by default, my other option is you go all out. So what happens with trauma, I tend to have no support system. I have one current best friend if I'm lucky, right? Because if you're all in and you betray me, but I'm not ready to put you all out, by default, you get to stay all in. More trauma, more re-victimization, right? More broken trust. So what we want to do is give our brains a whole bunch of different places where we can stick lots of different individuals in our lives so that we can get away from the all in or all out. We can move people through these different categories. That's going to help us to maintain still some level of a support system. Okay, so boundaries. We have a ton of boundaries. Hey, come on in. We have a ton of boundaries. And for the purpose of the model, we can have a whole conference on boundaries forever, right? But the model just uses 2 types, emotional and physical. And it's going to break those down, make it really easy, and teach you how to use them. The last one is privacy. I feel like in our field of mental health, currently, privacy is like the last frontier. And let me tell you, I do not know how anyone can do boundaries without understanding privacy or what their right to privacy is. They are so hand in hand. So privacy is super important, and we're going to make it really easy. Okay, moving right along. So trust. By the way, if you could hold your questions till the very end, I forgot to ask that because I was telling, that I'll follow you down a rabbit hole, and then I got 20 more for your one. So we'll just stay on track. Okay. So trust. First thing with trust has to be earned. You never just give someone your trust. Someone has to earn your trust. Next one, trust takes time to build. I had an area in my backyard that I needed to put some sort of privacy barrier up, right? So that was like an excuse to go on Pinterest for like 1,500 hours, I'm sure, right? I made it bored. I spent all this time looking at all this cool stuff. In the end, I extended my existing fence, right? Wasted all the time. But then I had to measure it. I had to figure out how many 4x4s and the posts that go that way, the cedar slats. I had to go online and check the price. I had to budget it. I had to wait for the money. I had to measure my vehicle. Can this wood even fit in my car? Schedule a day to go to the store, get it home. I had to borrow a tool, set a day up to start digging holes, right? It was a whole process. So just think, anytime you build almost anything, it takes time. Trust is no different. Trust takes time to build. So, when I have a client who's like, oh, Olivia, I feel like I've known her my whole life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how long have you known her? I met her 2 weeks ago. Okay, you don't know her. You've been alive longer than 2 weeks. I promise you, right? But that's what happens because your heart wants to fall. And we're going to see why that can be such a dangerous risk in just a second. So trust takes time to build. Because of that, we give very little trust to a stranger. Why? Because you don't know them. You don't know if you can trust them. right? You don't know anything about them. But the opposite is not also true. We don't trust someone just because we know them. So you may know people and you might know them super, super well, and they're incredibly untrustworthy, right? I'm thinking of like half my high school class. Like, I would not let you in my house so you cannot borrow my car. You can't hold my purse, right? Why? Because I know you and I know I can't trust you. So trust takes time to build. Little trust to a stranger, but don't trust someone just because you know them. So then the question is, well, who are you supposed to trust, right? You're supposed to trust no one? The truth is, you trust those who are trustworthy. That's who you give your trust to. A person who has shown you they're a trustworthy person, that's someone who it's safer to give them more trust. So then we ask, well, how do you know who's trustworthy? What determines that, right? Is it if they like dogs and show you a dog picture? Yes. Yes. So here are 8 traits of a trustworthy person. They are loyal and reliable. Here's another caveat really quick. Anytime you're talking about boundaries with someone, you got to be really mindful. You're going to bump into their shame because each of us have just either blown it with boundaries or been like, oh my gosh, that was so dumb. You know what? Why did I say all that? I don't even know that person. Like, now I got to work with them. It's terrible, right? You failed in boundaries, which all of us have at some point, right? So you got to be mindful when you're teaching groups and sharing them all. First one, a trustworthy person is loyal. Here's the other thing. This list is not set in stone. This is like a starting point. So part of SAMHSA's key features of trauma-informed care is to empower clients. So I'm going to say, these are some traits. This is not set in stone. What helps you trust someone? We want clients to think for themselves. I'm not the expert who's going to tell you what to do in each relationship. I'm going to teach you the model, and then we're going to have conversations, and you're going to figure it out, right? So I'm going to say, what helps you trust someone? And is there something on that list you don't really care about? And if they're like, I don't really care about that, sweet, take it off. What do you want to put in its place? What has helped you to trust someone? What has broken trust with you, right? Okay, so someone who is loyal and reliable. What does it mean if someone's loyal? It means they don't betray you. I think the most difficult boundaries many of us face, lots of our clients face, are familial boundaries, right? So if you think they don't betray you, so someone you can put more trust in, family, doesn't matter who it is, they don't betray you and they're reliable. So what does it mean to be reliable? If someone says, hey, I'm going to show up at 6:30 to help you with whatever it is, right? And for the most part, they show up at 6:30, that's someone who you can rely on. So someone who is showing you that they're loyal to you, they're reliable, that's a person you keep giving more of your trust to, right? Next one, their words align with their actions. So if I constantly see you do something differently than what you're telling me, I can't reconcile my ears with my eyes when it comes to you, I'm going to give you less trust. And the model's going to tell you, what does it mean to give someone less trust? What does it look like? It's going to make it really simple. Next one, you don't catch them lying to other people. Have you ever been standing next to someone and had someone else come up and you're like, you're not in the military. Like, you're making me feel so weird because you're standing here lying to this person and we both know you're lying. Like, what do you expect me to do? You know, I'm just go along with this, or right? It's so so embarrassing, right? So making sure that if you're watching someone lie to another person, that's less trust. Why? Because they're showing you can't trust them. It needs to mean something when you can trust someone, and it needs to mean something when you can't trust someone. Too many times we can't trust someone, it doesn't mean anything. There's no relational change, right? Next one, they don't talk bad about other people behind their back and then pretend to be their best friend. So that's like someone who's just bagging on someone and then they walked up and they're like, you're just thinking, I would never know based on how you're acting right now that you didn't like that person, right? But the trick is pay attention. If you see that, give them less trust, right? Next one, they don't steal. Now be mindful, especially those individuals who work with people who have been in the system or who have stolen something, right? This is where I like to say, none of us are going to hit this list perfectly, right? You're probably lying if you say, oh yeah, I got all of those traits, Olivia, I'm perfectly trustworthy, right? At some point, we fall short, we messed up. So we say, let this be a standard for us. Right? We can work towards having more of these traits if we want to be more of a trustworthy person. This is what's going to take to sort of like clean it up and tighten it up. Okay, and stealing. It doesn't even have to be great big items, right? It could be someone who kind of like on the regular justifies taking stuff that doesn't belong to them. Oh, it's a big corporation. They totally are ripping me off on milk. Therefore, they only cheat, right? Or if you're at work, they don't pay me enough, right? I work through lunch, so now this stapler's mine, right? If you're just kind of watching someone on the regular take things that don't belong to them, you got to give them less trust because it's showing that they have poor boundaries when it comes to other people's possessions, right? They don't get that. And so I'm probably not going to let you in my car. I'm not going to have you at my house, right? Okay, next one. They show empathy. Again, empathy is a huge idea. So we could probably do a whole conference on empathy. I like to keep it short and sweet. So just think, they grieve when you grieve, they rejoice when you rejoice. So when you are busted, flat on your face, struggling, they are there with you. And when you're like getting better and climbing up, right, they celebrate you. Someone who's only there for the trauma and the drama, but they're not there when you're doing better, got to give them less trust. Someone who only celebrates you when you're succeeding, but when you're failing, where'd they go, right? You got to give them less trust. It's someone who's walking with you through both the peak and the pit. Next one, they feel guilt when they wrong someone. So, excuse me, right? So you're looking for the presence of a conscience. So if someone's like, hey, can I call you back? I just feel so bad. I need to go apologize to this person, right? If I hear that, I'm like, oh, okay, you feel bad because you did something bad. That's fitting, right? But if someone's like, well, that's their problem. They should have thought of that before XYZ. Or, hey, that's their own guilt for being dumb. If I hear someone blame someone else for their poor behavior, I'm going to back up and give less trust because they're showing me they're not as trustworthy, right? Okay, last one, they respect your boundaries, right? So this is a big one, especially in families. Let's say that I have someone who I'm like, hey, this person makes me feel unsafe. This person makes me feel just bad in general. They threatened me, whatever the situation is, I'm telling this person, and now I go to their house and they invited the other person over. They're not respecting my boundaries, right? I just told you, this person doesn't make me feel safe. Now I'm showing up to dinner and you invited them over. What the freak, right? Like, that's confusing. That's not respecting your boundaries, less trust. So if you say no or don't or stop, I don't like this, then it's like, oh, come on. Let's just do it one time, right? They start doing some coercive control or try to do coercion on you. They move your boundary back with their words. They're not respecting you. You got to give them less trust. And again, the model's going to show you what it means to give someone less trust. Okay, so boundaries. With boundaries, we said there's lots of boundaries for the model. You just have to learn two. It's emotional and physical. So we'll start with physical. When we're using physical boundaries with the model, it's just proximity, how physically close someone is to you versus how far away someone is. So right now, this podium is proximally closer to me than the door. It's just physically closer to me than the door, right? So when we're talking about using boundaries in the model, it's how close versus how far away from you physically someone is. With emotional boundaries, that's just the line to which you emote with another person. So in the model, we define emoting as how much of what's in your head and how much of what is in your heart you share with another person. So if I'm telling you all my business, I'm telling you everything I'm thinking, everything I'm feeling, everything I'm worried about, everything I'm hoping, all my traumas, my greatest fears, greatest dreams, right? I'm sharing all of that with you. I'm emoting to a great extent with you, which means I'm having very little emotional boundaries. But if I'm not telling you like really nothing, I'm not telling you what I'm thinking, I'm not telling you what I'm feeling, you don't know much about my life, I'm not emoting to a great extent, and I'm having very strong emotional boundaries. See how that works? So, and we'll revisit that over and over again. Well, a few times because we only have an hour. Okay. So moving right along. So what belongs to self? So here is a sneak peek at the model. If you look at self, right, the most defined parts at the bottom, self is made up of your thoughts, feelings, fears, worries, dreams, past failures, traumas, disappointments. In a nutshell, it's everything that's in your head, everything that's in your heart and your physical body. All of that belongs to self. All of that is private. All of that is no one's business unless you say it's someone's business, right? So what causes us to misunderstand privacy? Why would we have to go to a conference and even hear someone talk about privacy, right? But really, it's kind of, we think of HIPAA, when you hear privacy, you think of HIPAA and probably maybe like private parts, I don't know, something else like that, right? But you don't really think like, what else is private? It's everything in your head, everything in your heart, and your physical self. Why do we misunderstand it? It usually comes from a violation of privacy, and a lot of times we were raised with no privacy, right? And that can be different amongst cultures too. So that would be any type of abuse. If you had any type of abuse, you had a violation of privacy. Someone's hitting you, it's violating your privacy. If someone is exposing themselves to you, forcing you to expose yourself to them, right, touching without permission, any of those types of things is a violation of privacy. But it can also be something like, I had a friend when we were kids, her brother got her journal. Oh my goodness. And they were at the dinner table and she walked in and he was reading it. And so, of course, she sat down and it took a minute for her to realize. She wrote like the worst stuff. In fact, she had to go to therapy because of what they read. When she's a kid, we laugh our heads off about it now, right? But it was not funny when we're those. It was mortifying. She was so embarrassed, and when she got mad and tried to take the journal back, right? She got shamed for it. Oh, sit down. Don't be that way. Don't you act like that. We're concerned for you. We want to know what's going on, right? And so he got to keep reading. So do you think she understood her right to privacy? Do you think she understood boundaries, right? What does that set that kid up later on for relationships? She's not going to understand another person's privacy, and she's not going to understand that she has a right to privacy, right? Boundary issues, relational trauma, and more problems. Another one could be, I had a friend who got a DUI, and he was starting a new job because, like many people who get DUIs, right, lost his license, lost his relationship, lost his job, right? So he's going into a new job, and he said, hey, Olivia, at what point do I need to tell everyone I got a DUI? And I was like, what? At no point. That's nobody's business. You have a right to privacy. Unless it's like HR or your supervisor, if you're driving a vehicle or something, right? Then they might need to know. But just working with other individuals, no. But knowing my friend's history, when he was growing up, if you were asked a question and you didn't just like give all the information at once to someone else's like desire, by default, you were a liar. Right? And if you're a liar in that house, you're a piece of garbage, and anyone can treat a piece of garbage any way they want. So he learned, you ask me a question, it's my job to stand here and just tell you all my business. So see how that's another right of a violation of privacy, right? He's getting access to here and here with no trust being built. Okay, moving right along. So relationships, we have many, many types of relationships. Here are some. These are just a few. You have a relationship with yourself, partner, you have a partner, family, friend, coworker, acquaintance, and strangers, right? These are just a few of the relationships we have. So then the question becomes, well, what role does the type of relationship factor into our boundary? So we're going to talk about levels of sharing based on a relationship type. So based on the type of relationship it is, what are you supposed to share with that relationship type of person in your life, right? So stranger. We want to give very surface level information to strangers, pretty much what they can see, right? Be polite. You don't have to run out of window screaming because a stranger asks you about a banana, right? Be polite. You don't ever have to be nice. Nice gets your boundary crossed and get people hurt, right? Nothing personal. Make your interactions brief. Have you ever like waited for a bus with someone or sat on a bus with someone? And one of you is going to tell the other person your whole life, or on a plane. Right? Anytime you're with a person for an extended period of time, your brain starts to think you know better than you do. And you definitely do not, right? So here is a trick. Learn to share with strangers based off your 5 senses. So taste, touch, sight, smell, sound. So if I'm in Winco, here's an example. These bananas look right. That's my eyes, right? These look right, and it sure is cold in here. Right? That lets me be friendly. It allows me to be polite, but I'm not giving up any information. Right? I'm not talking about my divorce and my kids and all stuff so I can hate myself for the next 2 weeks. Like, oh my gosh, not every aisle I'm trying to avoid that person because I just told them all my business for no reason at all, right? So that helps you keep it in the present because we know from mindfulness, if you focus on your 5 senses, it keeps you in the here and now. So if you're sharing based off the here and now, what are you not doing? You're not telling all your business from the past, all your business from the future, right? Acquaintance. Nothing deep, keep it surface level. It is okay to share based off common interests, right? So this would be like for people who are dating. We got to have something to talk about, but I don't know you, so I don't want to give you all my business, right? But we can talk about a shared interest to see if there's even a point to us going any further. So a lot of times when you have an acquaintance in your life, try to find a shared interest, and that's what's safe to talk about. So no past traumas, no issues. Something like, I enjoy kayaking and hiking. How about you? Right? Short and sweet. Tell them some interest and then go from there. Coworker. With coworkers, it's okay to share some interests. Thoughts, hopes are work related. So over time, you can become friends with the coworker, and we're going to show you what that looks like in just a second. And that's not an unhealthy or dysfunctional thing, but that's when trust has been earned. So you can say something like, I sure hope we get a Christmas bonus. So I'm sharing the hope, but my hope is work related. That makes sense? Okay. Next one, friend. So with friends, not all friends are created equal. We go back to that trauma boundary model, trauma bonding, right? We want every single friend to serve the exact same purpose as the other friend. Have you ever noticed that? We want every friend to be exactly the same as the other friend, and then we get really hurt and upset when that doesn't happen. And it never happens, right? So we're like, a lot of disappointment in relationships. But what we want to learn is not all friends are created equal. You may have like a book club friend, you might have an emotional friend, a concert friend. So when you're struggling, you don't want to call your concert friend and try to share a bunch of emotional stuff with them, right? You're going to hang up mad. Like, every time you need me, I'm here. I need you one time, where'd you go, right? Big letdown, big frustration. So being mindful and helping our clients to understand we have different levels of friendships with different people, and it's okay. In fact, it's healthy, right? Next one, family, same thing. Not all family is created equal. Your business is not automatically your family's business. And I always say, good luck telling my family that. Right? They're going to prove how it is in just about 5 minutes, right? But be mindful, not all families created equal. You may have an aunt who has spent a lifetime building trust with you. And then you may have an aunt who has done nothing but a lifetime of breaking trust with you. You would not share the same with both of those aunts, because one's proving trustworthy and safe for you, and one is proving to not be safe and trustworthy. So you have a right to privacy even with family. Partner. No one gets more of self than partner in our types of relationships. This is how you can protect your partnership by holding those boundaries. And we're going to show you what that looks like in just a second. I don't have a mouse in my pocket yet. I keep saying we, sorry. So if you don't have a partner, it's normal to experience loneliness, right? Because you're not emoting and sharing at that level with anyone if you don't have a partner. So one thing that I like to have clients who are single do is just write down, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Because that's what you're sharing with the partner. What's in here and what's in here, right? And that can help with that. And finding different people to serve different purposes. Okay, so here is a great trick. Learn to share based off your role. So if you will learn to factor your role into the relationship before you share, that's going to help you keep your sharing appropriate. And I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like in just a second. Okay, so now we're already to how do you use the model? Again, we're back to what the model looks like. You can see with self, right? This is everything that's private. Here is I don't know if it's a rule, but we'll just say it's a rule. You always emote out from self. No one goes here but you. That's really important. You're going to see why in just a second. So I can make someone a partner. I can make someone a family, someone a friend. As trust is built and earned, someone can go through my model and get closer to self, and I can share more of what's in here, and physical self, right? But also as trust is broken, I can move someone through my model as well. That's the beauty of the model. You have the physical and you have the emotional boundaries that you can play with and use to help you stay safe in your relationships, right? Because if someone betrayed you at work, you can't be like, well, that job sucked, I'm out of there because that one person betrayed me, right? You got to go to work. At least I have to go to work. I don't know about you guys, right? But this way, your physical boundary might not change, but that emotional boundary can change. So when you use the model, you're going to base that emotional boundary, how much of what's in here and what's in here you share, based off the trust that's earned and your role. The physical boundary tends to be based off relational type. And that's going to make a lot of sense in just a second. So what you first want to do, identify what type of relationship is this. Then look at how much trust has been built or broken. What's my relationship in the role or my role in the relationship? And that's how you're going to know what to share. So let me show you an example. Let's say I start a job. So right now I've been with Capstone Counseling. I think I'm in my 15th year. There's really not anyone I've really worked with less than 10 years, I think. So, I mean, we've been through it, right? All the years, went through all the stuff. And there's complete trust, right? I mean, I see the heart they have for the people they serve. They are honest. We always help each other out. I've not had a problem. There's no backbiting, no backside. I just don't deal with any of that. And they've built that trust over an extended period of time, right? So if I were to go start a new job, My brain has my coworkers right here, right now. And that's totally not dysfunctional or unhealthy because trust has been built to that extent. The only way it would be unhealthy, unsafe, is if trust were not built to that extent and I let it go there anyway, right? But I know there's not a thing on the planet I couldn't ask anyone to come and help me with it, and they would, just like a family, hopefully a good family member would, right? So if I start a new job, my brain's like, oh, coworkers, bam, tries to immediately stick everyone in family, which means I'm giving them a great deal of trust that they haven't earned yet, because the truth is they're closer to strangers, it's a brand new job, than they are family, right? So you have to be mindful. If I'm starting a new job, physically, everyone's in coworker. That's normal to be as physically close as coworkers are, because I'm at work, right? But emotionally, I protect my right to privacy. I exercise my rights through the use of boundaries by keeping that emotional boundary up here at stranger. So I'm only going to ask about what's here now. Where's the stapler? Where does this paper go? What do I do when this is done? Where are the bathrooms, right? I'm keeping everything to the here and now. Like I said, have you ever started a new job, told all your business to like the worst person you could have done that to, and you realized it about a week later? You're like, great. How many people know all my business now? It's so embarrassing, right? So you got to be mindful. Yes, it's coworker physically, emotionally. Everybody stays a stranger until trust has been earned, and then people can start moving down. So let's take a look at, here's another big thing. Everyone has their own model. We're not all sharing the same model, right? I have my own model. Each of you have your model. The people you serve have their own model, right? People in your lives have their own model. And you may find that you're at different places than other people. I had someone share with me, after explaining the model, he was like, oh man, I just finally understand why the person who I think is my best friend, what's going on. And he said, I keep trying to stick him here. I try to invite him to like Easter. At the time Easter had just passed, I invite him to Easter. I'm always trying to call him. I'm the one who invites him everywhere, right? He never calls me. He never invites me. I try to ask about his life. He doesn't tell me anything. So I said, okay, based on the model, where do you have him? Family. Where do you think he has you? Like he has me an acquaintance, right? And so sometimes you'll feel that. You'll feel that someone's not letting you in, and like to them, they're like your whole life. And it's so painful and frustrating. So part of empowering the client, right, or the person in my life, then I say, okay, so now that you've kind of discovered this, what do you want to do about it? And he was like, well, I'm going to stick him in acquaintance too. I'm going to back up emotionally. I'm going to stop calling him so much. I'm going to stop sharing so much. I'm going to not invite him to family type of events, right? And then maybe he'll have time to build trust, and then hopefully we can both move back through the model together. That makes sense, right? That's a great plan. So be mindful. Pay attention to how you feel, where you're at in someone's model, how you're being treated, and then how you're treating. It's not that that guy was wrong. Neither of them were wrong. That's just where it was. Sometimes people have trust issues and they don't know how to let someone in. We don't know how to let someone in, right? Or sometimes there's something that happened and you don't understand and they just don't touch it. Okay, let's look at some issues that have been explained. It can be explained by the model. So the first one, affairs. Everybody say, oh, boo, sad. Boo, right? So with affairs, let's say that I started a job, someone started a stranger. Over time, they built my trust with them. They moved to acquaintance and then coworker. This is emotional because they're already here physically at coworker. And then they came into friends, family. And before I knew it, and let's say I'm married, before I knew it, I was sharing with them what's in my head, what's in my heart, as much as I would my partner, right? So I'm not really sharing any differently with my coworker than my partner. Both are getting that much of self. So we would call that an emotional affair, right? If I can't differentiate how I'm giving more to my partner emotionally than I'm giving you, that's an emotional affair. So if I'm like, wake up one day and I'm like, oh crap, I'm having an emotional affair, right? Then what I would do is pop that coworker out into one of these rungs emotionally. So I may say, okay, I don't trust myself even to share with you at coworker. I don't want to talk to you how I feel about work because I know myself, I'm going to slip right back there. So I'm going to keep it at acquaintance and just talk about work. Not how I feel about work, but just about work. And that's how I protect my marriage and I keep that part of my life separate and safe, right? If my coworker makes the way through the rungs physically, now I'm physically giving my coworker as much as I am my partner. That's what we call an affair, a physical affair, which is what most of us think of when we think of affairs, right? Okay, parentification. It's that one. Everybody say boo again. Boo. When we parentify a child, right? Let's say I have a kid and like life is hard. We go through all this stuff. I'm always there for the kid. The kid is always there for me. We're building tons and tons of trust, right? Over time, that kid may emotionally move into partner, which means I'm giving this child as much of what I'm going through mentally and emotionally in my heart, right? I'm sharing just as much as I would a partner, right? The problem is the child's there for me emotionally, I'm there for me emotionally, but I've just emotionally abandoned the child. That kid's gonna grow up and think it's their job to solve the world's problems. They're gonna continue to abandon themselves emotionally, right? They're gonna chase rejection, develop codependency, all the wonderful stuff that goes with that, right? Yeah. So the trick is, this is where you have to factor in your role, because if trust were built, right, according to the model, they're good to go there if trust has been built to that level. But the problem is, when I look at my role, it's parent. So I got to pop that kid back into family, because the truth is, my kid can't save me from a bad marriage, from a bad boss, from financial ruin, right? They can't fix any of those problems. So if I'm telling that type of stuff to a kid like I would a partner, I'm parentifying a child. Okay, next one, codependency and domestic violence. If you are looking at attachment, right? If you're looking at someone's attachment, and we're looking at preoccupied, then we have demanding, controlling, intrusive, jealous, right? That comes with codependency, but that's also like a pretty good outline of someone who's a perpetrator of domestic violence, demanding and controlling, intrusive, jealous. What happens is, if I have codependency, I want to go right there in your model, right? I want to know every thought you have, every text you send, every email that you send, everywhere your eyes look, every person who you heard that day. I want to control the clothes you're wearing eventually. I want to control where you work, how you walk, the way you talk, right? I want full access, and then I try to get full control, because that's how I feel I'm safe. I feel like that's my best chance of you not leaving me. If you let me there, then I'm going to know for sure you love me, right? The problem is, remember, no one goes there but me. Nobody goes there but me. Nobody controls my eyes, my body, what I wear, the way I walk, the way I talk. All of that is solely, I'm fully capable of managing all that. Thank you very much. Right? So help someone get back out and keep those boundaries and say, you know what, I do love you, but no, you can't have the full access there, because that is reserved for me alone. Dating, same thing, kind of like with the new job, right? If I'm messaging a couple times and now we're sitting at a coffee shop or something, right? Having a date, my brain says, oh, partner, sticks you right there. And now, by the time I leave, like, we're remodeling my basement, we're talking about for our cabin, right? I just told you all my history, my trauma, my children, my divorce, right? I go through everything. That's really not anyone's business who doesn't know me that way, right? But we have to remember, you're not partner, you're potential partner. You're actually closer to stranger than you are partner. So even though I'm hoping for partner, maybe, because you're a potential partner, right? I'm going to stick you closer to acquaintance. And this is where we can find a shared interest, and that's what we can talk about. Keep it to the present and also the shared interest. Everything else is reserved for later when you've earned my trust, right? Professionals. So for all of you, right? When you go and help someone in any type of a setting, they're giving you a lot of trust, right? This is why we're heavily regulated, as we should be, because sometimes you have a stranger going right there, and they're giving us a lot of trust. And sometimes we can feel like, where's the line? How much of my personal life am I supposed to really share with you? Because the natural tendency is, if you feel like someone's sharing a lot with you, you want to meet them there, because then you feel rude, or you can be embarrassed if you don't share at the same level they share, right? But that's something like narcissists are preying on. They're sharing a lot and they're not. Detectives also use that. It's cognitive empathy, right? So what you want to do is make sure, oh, you have your own model. You're telling me all your private history because you're coming to me for help. But in my model, my role is helper. And so I'm going to keep them there. I may keep them there, right? Where our shared interest in this case is whatever the topic of their need is. That's our shared interest. That's what I talk about. I myself don't talk any further down this heart system than acquaintance, right? And then for them, they may let me be in here because they need to tell me what's going on with them so I can best know how to help them. See the difference there? But that's not their role in my life. They're not helper for me, I'm helper for them. So that's something that can really help. Okay, so you really want to make the model your own. If you find that on the model, there is a significant relationship you have that's not represented, add it. We want to teach our clients to add it because remember, there's a lot of relationships that are not on here. So if, take for example, student, right? If I'm a teacher, a significant relationship type I have are students. That's a population I work with many months out of the year. And I have to know what's on the table, what's off the table. How am I supposed to share and how am I not supposed to share? What's appropriate, what's not appropriate, right? So I would decide, and in working with teachers, I'll say, okay, so where do you want to place students on your model? You know, and I had one say, I would do a backslash and write student right there. Or I've had one say, I would want to share between acquaintance and coworkers, so they just drew a rung and called it student. And then you define what's on the table, what's off the table. Well, I would talk about school. I'm okay to talk about shared interest, but I want to talk about any other private part of my life, right? And I said, okay, that's a good plan. So make sure that you teach people to make the model their own. The one caveat is always keep stranger, acquaintance, partner, and self, because that gives you a point of reference for sharing, right? Because then it's like self, partner versus stranger, acquaintance. Everything else is free game. So if someone doesn't work, take coworker out. If someone doesn't have access to family or want to have a family run, take it out, right? Everything else in between can be changed with no problem. Okay, so we're going to move through for the sake of time. Let's say for professionals. Here is a big thing, especially for advocating for our clients. No matter what role you serve in your community, it's really important to understand, again, sometimes people are going to a specialist or a stranger, right? So let's say that it's my, I have to go see an endodontist, right? That's a specialist. So that's someone that I'm going to see maybe 1 or 2 times in my entire life, and I'm letting him have access to self in that first meeting. That is not inappropriate because I'm going there for help, and I'm doing that with the professional who's being regulated. Does that make sense? They're being governed by an outside body to make sure they're trustworthy and to make sure that they're safe for me. So I may in one meeting meet someone, but we want to teach our clients, pay attention. How did you feel, making the phone call? Did you feel safe? Did you feel like they listened to you? Or were you having a panic attack by the time you hung up? Did you just want to get off the phone, right? How did you feel walking in the office? Did you feel good? Did it feel bad, right? How did you feel sitting down in the chair? How did you feel when they came in the room? And then we want to teach them, if at any time you feel anything other than good and great about it, they're not treating you well, then you can say things like, I'm really sorry, I wasn't prepared for this type of an examination today. Or, hey, I'm going to have to do some more research, and if I decide to reschedule, I'll call you back and make another appointment. You always have a right to privacy, even with a professional. That's really important to teach someone or talk to someone who has had trauma, right? We're always talking about what's more safe and what's less safe. And even for our own selves, right? If you go to a dentist and you don't feel good, don't go back. There's like 50,000 dentists in Utah. Why in the world do we need to go see a dentist that makes us feel like garbage, right? There will be one who makes you feel safe. There will be one who does good work and does well for you. So good thing to teach our clients. Here is an example of someone named Becky. She's not real. Don't worry. I'll put my client's information up here. So with Becky, she's a fictitious character. These are her significant relationships. So in helping Becky, I'm going to have her write down I didn't need that. Sorry about that. I don't have to read it. What are her significant relationships? So you can see she has Ralph. That's a brother that I trust. And if you look, Ralph's in family. Perfect. Sarah, that's a sister that broke trust. Sarah's there. But Sarah's working towards rebuilding trust. That is the beauty of the model. We don't have to just cut someone completely out to feel safe anymore. We can back up emotionally and still allow them in our life unless there is a significant, action that occurred that they need to go. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes someone needs to go in stranger and stay there forever, and that's okay too. And sometimes someone just needs to be popped out to acquaintance. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe you got to work your own stuff out, right? But the good thing is there is still a chance for them to come closer if trust is rebuilt. Let's see, Mike, boss that I'm not sure I trust yet. So she's keeping Mike an acquaintance until she can get to know him better. Jake is a partner that I trust, so Jake stays there, and Sue's a friend that I trust, so Sue is in friend. So I like to have clients write out their relationships and chart them, right? Where are they at right now? And then based off the amount of trust that's been built or broken, Where would you want to put them, right? And sometimes that model looks entirely different. So again, you're going to have to know within your scope of practice how much processing you would do with clients with their boundaries. But the thing is, you can always teach the key principles and concepts to clients, and you'd be amazed. Just like I'm sure many of you today, right now, like your bells and whistles are going off. Like, oh, that's what's wrong there. Oh, so I keep doing that. Oh, I'm not talking to that person anymore. But just gave me permission to tell them no, right? Okay, so here are 2 QR codes. One is for my book that is on Amazon, and then there's a companion guide. It just has the main points broken down. It's on my website. You can follow me on Relational Trauma 101 on almost every social media platform. Also, if you belong to another group, or if you're like, oh, I want you to come and explain this at whatever type of settings, so I do staff trainings, it doesn't matter. Just DM me, and I'm sure we can work something out. And then that's my email. So we don't have a huge amount of time for Q&A, but if you have a burning question, just email me, and I will do my best to help you through it. So does anyone have a question? I know it was a lot. Thanks for listening. I feel like I just hammered this out. There you go. Okay, any questions?
There's a question online.
Okay.
And if you don't mind repeating, Olivia.
I will, yeah.
They're just asking if there's like if they would be able to have the PowerPoint or
yeah, I don't do the PowerPoint, I'm sorry, because it's all copywritten, but there is that companion guide. I think it's $4.99 and it's on my website, and that's the QR code. So relational trauma sorry, they're asking for the PowerPoints. So yeah. PowerPoint. I'm not, yeah.
And so this is being recorded, so they may be able to see the recording.
Okay, yeah, you can also go review the recording again. Yep, which would be totally fine. Do it. Yeah, and the model is copyrighted, but in my book, and even now, the only caveat is if you believe this will help another person, copy it. Copy it, use it, give it away as much as you want, right? And I'll tell you the truth, I find that in working with clients, eventually I just draw it on the board. I just have clients draw it on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? The point is keep the self, partner, stranger, acquaintance and stranger, and then let them fill in the middle. And then what's on the table goes off the table. Good question. Any other questions? Angela, nothing.
Hey, thank you for going over the part about the professional because, you know, like even though they're regulated, like things have happened with you,
right.
A lot of people.
And sometimes they don't treat you good. And you know what? Then go for it.
So I have a question related to this experience. You know, sometimes my goal as going to the hospital, and sometimes you have to build that stuff really fast.
Yeah.
And so, like, is it healthy to be able to relate to the experience? And where do you go?
Yeah, good question. And I think anyone in a helping profession has that same struggle and not knowing it. And we are used to using that to build trust. But one thing that to keep in mind is you don't know them. And when you're opening up with your story, even in the name of health, you're still putting yourself, you're making yourself really vulnerable with somebody you don't know. But I think most times empowering someone tends to build the most trust, especially someone in crisis. So if you say, it's all what you want, you're leading the whole thing. I'm just here to make sure what you need happens. So if you just want to let me know when you feel safe, right, what you want, then you're the lead on this. Nothing's going to happen unless you want it to. So if you just let me know what you need, I can give you some options and we can talk about those or for as little as long as you want to. So I think a way to kind of move away from that, I would say, is focus more on empowering them and letting them know their rights, right? And that's also how we do good trauma-informed care. So good question. Great question. So hard to know. You're not well known. I didn't repeat that. He was asking about, for those of you who are online, he was asking about sharing lived experience as a way to build trust, which we can do. And sometimes that turns into other stuff, and sometimes it does work and it does help. But I think showing empathy and focusing more on empowering tends to go further. Yeah, good question though. Any other questions? Yeah.
What do we do with our life now?
People vote on.
Change.
Yeah.
Before and after. I mean it.
I believe you. Yes.
I'm shocking.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So he said, what are we supposed to do now? Because there's like a before and an after. That's what I hope. You know, that's what we hope for our clients. Because many of us have been trapped or like in bondage in relationships in the name of love, in the name of family, in the name of friendship, in the name of not being alone for so many years. And you just feel like garbage, right? And all the time. It's like you wake up and it's just you dread stuff. And a lot of that is from relational boundaries that we do not know how to have. So yeah, great question. I would say draw your own model, map out your own relationships, and decide how close people are, and if that needs to change, right? Yeah. Ooh, learning how to, she asked, how do you learn how to say no? There's like really cool sheets on Pinterest, good question, that say 50 ways to say no, without really saying no. So like, oh, it's not a good time, but maybe check back with me later. Or yeah, that's not something I can do right now. So there's a lot of ways you can say no without having to say no, but also no is a complete sentence. And you'll know who respects you and who doesn't. Because if you say no and they drop it, they're showing you respect. If you say no and they do it anyway, to whatever extent or in regard that is, they're not showing you respect, but now you know what to do with that. Wow, I said no. You keep asking. You're showing me I can't trust you. So emotionally, I'm giving less of this and this. When I have a problem that you're not going to pour in my heart and soul out to.
So hard, personal relationship. You have with somebody for so long, but then you catch yourself after hearing all this, and you're like, oh, I haven't said no for a really long time. How do I go back to my spouse and be like, hey, stop putting me on the back burner?
Yeah, right? Yeah, so she has to, how do I go back now when I've spent all these years not saying no? How can I go back now and start saying no? You know, you start where you're at. And sometimes it's a lot of conversations. And usually in relationships, we got to be mindful. This is one of maybe 300 conversations we're going to have about this. And this is just the first one. So it's probably going to go bad. It's probably not going to come out right, you know, but I think getting clear with yourself is always the first key. Really understanding what is it I want? What is it I'm asking for? What is the line for me? What will I have and what will I not have in my life? You got to get really clear and strong in yourself first. And then you try to address that. It is so scary, but it's like fruits and vegetables, water, exercising, right? So doing self-help stuff, growing, all of that stuff tends to start first. And then by default, self gets stronger, and then it's easier to set those relational boundaries. Good question. You're not alone in that struggle. Yeah, see, many people are like, oh, yeah, I can turn it. She said it turns into codependency. And then you're chasing rejection. You got to back up. You got to let go a little bit and back up. Yes, because you will chase rejection when you struggle with codependent traits. Yep. So true. I know you have to know. Right? It's hard. It's hard. Any other questions? I think we got 1 minute left.
When people don't want to like leave everyone that is in connection with.
Yeah.
But then, you know, some people we hold on to people when we really shouldn't.
Should you let them go?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hard to let go.
It is. But you know, okay, so she said, you know, sometimes we've been holding on to people who we need to be letting go of, and it's really hard to let go. One thing that really helps is understanding the 8 traits of a trustworthy person. It's pretty hard to be in denial with yourself when you're like, oh yeah, you consistently don't hit these things, but now I know what to do about it. I back up from you emotionally, and sometimes I back away from you physically. And now you know how to give less emotionally. You don't share as much of what's here. That doesn't come out of your mouth as much, right? And then physically, you can be further and further from them. So I think looking at the 8 traits, and if they're not trustworthy for you, the people who have earned the most trust get to be closest to you. The ones who have broken most trust get furthest from you. So if someone doesn't want to earn trust with you, they just don't get to be closest to you, and that's up to them. Yep, just back it up until you feel famous. Yes, and then if they start to earn trust, then they can come back to the model. And a lot of times with affairs, it's like you have an affair and they go an acquaintance, they say sorry, you just want to feel good again, you don't want to hurt anymore, and they go back to partner. Through the model, trust takes time to build, broken trust takes time to rebuild. So someone has to go back through each of those categories and re-earn trust for you to feel safe. right? Sometimes you can't trust someone because you're not supposed to trust them. They're not trustworthy, right? That's on them, not on you. So hopefully that answers my question. It's hard stuff. Yeah, well, thank you all so much for coming. You've been